Here. Chris Wilson, former Ted Cruz campaign pollster and a partner of WPA Opinion Research. And Chris, good morning to you in Washington, D.C. And Arnon Mishkin of Mishkin Associates is the director for the Fox News Decision Desk. And the reason why we brought you two gentlemen on today is not to say, hey, everybody got it so wrong, because in fact some people were pretty close to the outcome. LA Times tracking poll, if we have that right now, Trump 47, Clinton 44. That was the final day before the vote on Tuesday. Also, another one, IBD, had this at Trump 45 and Clinton 43. But gentlemen, I want to know this to the side now, and this is not designed to be critical in any way of pollsters, the jobs they do. No, that's already happened.
Pile on.
I want to know, and Arnon, I'll start with you because you're sitting here. I think the deeper dive in all this is that what have you learned from what the voters told you now that we have the results?
First off, I would say that I'm not certain that the polls you cited as the most accurate were the ones that told us the most about the electorate.
What do you mean?
I think that the other polls, the ones that people are criticizing right now, the ones that showed Clinton in the lead, the ones that showed Clinton at 45, even the last Fox News poll, which had Clinton at 48 and Trump at 44, the 4-point gap, I think those may have been the most informative polls of what was going on in the electorate. If you go into a plain vanilla election and you have plain vanilla candidate who has a few nicks, who's been around, who no one thinks cannot do the job, floating at around 45 points in all the polls, and then you have another candidate who's a maverick, some of whom question whether or not they can do the job, who floats around 38, 40, which is basically what was going on in this election for all the time, that's telling you something. What that's telling you in this, and the outcome of this election reminds us that that's what it was telling us, what that's telling you is the public is not embracing the old established candidate, the Hillary Clinton, who was there floating at 45.
We can concede then, Arnon and Chris, that what you do is as much art as it is science.
Precisely.
Conceded, right? How do you then, Chris, and you tackle this, how do you gauge level of enthusiasm on behalf of the voting public? It seems to me that that's a challenge.
Well, it is, but I would disagree, actually, that it's as much art as it is science. I think it's significantly more science than it is art. If you look at the polls you cited, they were actually wrong. Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote. Where the polls were wrong were in the state-level versions. You look at specifically Pennsylvania, Ohio, I mean really Midwestern states that had a high turnout of whites without a college degree. And what's interesting is they weren't just off. I mean, Donald Trump spoke a lot about polls being off and rigged and whether or not they're making the calls. They weren't just off for Trump. They were off 7.4 points on average in the state that Trump won, but they were still off 3.7 points on average in states that Clinton won. Now what that gauges, and it gets back to the premise of your question, is how do you measure turnout? And I believe that is where the failures took place. And I can tell you, in the primaries, we learned very, very quickly.
Well, Jim, let me stop you there, because that's the art of polling then. When you're trying, when you're trying to gauge turnout.
Who's going to turn out?
And then you rely on your perhaps your sense of history and knowledge to try and get closer to what the eventual outcome would be, correct?
Well, it's let me go through the systematic approach to it, and I'll do it in as least boring a way as possible.